Well, how's it going? Right, my presentation today is going to be on Moby. Moby was born in 1965 in New York in a basement apartment. He was nicknamed Moby because he had ancestry. Melvin wasn't Melvin Herman Melville was the author of Moby Dick. So from a little child, he was nicknamed Moby. His dad was a professor of science in Harvard, but he had the unfortunate tragedy of dying in a car crash at the age of 2 years of age. So Moby was left with his single mother, and I presume she kind of went off the bat a little bit because she she moved back home first, and which was in Connecticut, and then he was born in 1965, and then in 1969 she ended up out in California or in San Francisco at the Summer of Love. So he has vague memories of their bumping into John Wayne when he was like 4 years of age. So from then on, then he moved back to Connecticut with his mother, and at the age of 15, he had his first crush on this girl, and he asked her to learn learn the guitar. So, well, he got to learn how to play the guitar, but his real, I suppose, goal was the girl, but he didn't get the girl. So anyway, he ended up kind of living in a lot of hippie communes with his mother. His mother was a bit of a stoner. He's one of his best friends at 8 years of age was Robert Downey Jr. His mother and her mother used to smoke together. So Moby ends up back in Connecticut, and so he's in all these hippie communes, and he's around a lot of extrovert people, and he's learning a lot of instruments and music and different ways around people. So at the age of 18, he bought his first 4-track recorder, a Tascam, because now he figured that he could actually produce his own music. One of his first bands, well, there was a couple of different bands. One was when he was like 17. What was the name of them? I can't even think of it now. But there was one track on it. It was a kind of a punk metal band, and one of the tracks was was Housewives on Volume. Right, so you can understand where he was at his time and his place. So he tried this. He was a couple of different bands and whatever. So eventually he moved back to New York when he was 18 years of age. He moved back to New York to go to college, and he was like his love was always for music, but he never looked on it as in he was going to make money out of it. I suppose taken from his father's side, he went off to college to study philosophy, which, as he said himself, didn't really help him in future because he says no one likes an arrogant prick at a table, So, but anyway, so on he went anyway, and he gave up his college, and he started into the music again, and so he had his 4-track recorder, so he kind of in the delayed. When he went to New York first, he started in the DJ scene, and he started getting involved in electronic equipment and drum machines and whatever. And he probably had his first couple of releases, but probably the one he's known more for is his third single, which sold him 4,000 copies, would have been Voodoo Child. Which was also an alias of him, which he produced other music. What isn't this playing? Sorry, no.
I think they're not actual links.
The screen in the bottom right, man, that's probably a link.
Huh?
The screen in the bottom right.
Yeah, it's the wrong song though.
Which one now?
I'd say just.
Oh right, sorry. Okay, look, here's one anyway. We'll just go to this. I'm gonna put in a fail safe. Okay, right. This one is one of his first tracks, which actually really brought him into the scene. But this is the original, not the one that made it for him. This is Go, and you can hear it. It's made with drum machines, and very simple in structure.
It's
Very
14
simple.
hours.
Keep going.
So yeah, so he made this one. This was in the early '90s, and so he then, because he had the claim fame with Voodoo Child, he then went and he produced Go, but he released this one, and then about 6 months later he added a sample from Twin Peaks, and which became known, became the original version, I suppose, that everyone knows. But that computer. But I don't know if I can play the original now. 1 second. Which is got a distinctive sample of here it is. Here it is. Of the Twin Peaks. But you can hear in his productions that like he's big into sampling and reverbs and all that kind of stuff, and his work. Everything is electronically used. He's not into like perfections. Like imperfections in music is what he thinks adds character to music. Okay, you can hear that. That's the lovely sample from before it kicks in. Right, so because
Just click up top, yeah.
where is it here?
No, click on it.
Right, so because he sold so many copies of Go, or he got his claim for fame actually came to him in England, and because of the type of character he was, very introvert, like that really hit him. I suppose he was happy at the time that he had made England, but his dream is America, of course, his hometown, and a lot of people didn't like him, the way he goes on and I suppose speaks his mind and whatever, So, but anyway, over the next couple of years, he done 2 albums after the Go. One was Everything Is Wrong, which he had good fame with, but his music style he kept similar to the techno scene and all that kind of stuff. And then after that, then he wrote another album which was Animal Rights, and I think after he wrote Everything Is Wrong, I think he wanted to try and crack the American market, and I'd say he was probably doing a little bit too much things or whatever, and his mind was because he spends most of his time in his own apartment, his mind was probably, went in the wrong direction, so he ended up doing like a punk album, like a punk techno album, and it just, his fans, like they didn't like it at all, and he kind of, it hit him hard. So then a couple of years went by, and 1990, at the end of the 90s, and Play came along. This album he wrote after the Animal Rights one. And Play, the one thing about Play is that because of he didn't have success with Animal Rights, no one really wanted to sign his new album, so he had to go around and look for new labels and whatever. So within doing Play, he signed every track on the album to a movie or whatever, because he thought, just let it out, see what happens. And I suppose one of the biggest movies of that time would have had Leonardo DiCaprio in it, Beat the Beach, and one of the tracks from it was Porcelain, and because of that, it became worldwide fame straight away. His album went top 10 in 10, 15 different countries worldwide, but he still had a problem with America, At the time, when Play came out, I was actually living in the States, and I went and saw his tour in Atlanta, and there was only about 400 people there at the show, which for a guy like Moby, which was a small crowd. But sorry, let me just jump back a couple of years. When he did have his claim to fame with doing Go and that, he toured America with the Prodigy and the Shaman, and that was in the early 90s, and that was a fun tour for me, I would say. But then the following year, he ended up touring with Aphex Twin and Orbital, and he really enjoyed it himself, but he said they hated him. He said like they hated him, you know. I said it was because of, I don't know, they just didn't like him at all. But anyway, so out comes Play, and let me just play a song from it here. With his because Moby, like, you know, he's an introvert character. He does like the way he works with his artists and whatever is he has a little basement apartment. Like he eventually ended up back in the basement apartment from where he was born as a child. But he would work on all his music himself. He'd write all his songs. He would get his examples from, or get his ideas from samples. And in this track, the sample on it is taken from an old gospel album. But he leaves all the impurities in the. If you listen closely, he leaves all the impurities in the sample, so it gives it more presence. So he doesn't clean it up, and that's his idea of production. It's like, you know, imperfections give it character, you know. But one of his big things too when he was in the early 90s and he was recording vocals was that he used to put his vocals through a reverb first and then through a compressor. And it was like there was some big engineers around at the time and they thought he was like really cool. And he's like, because he didn't really know what he's doing at the start, he started doing all these things backwards. But one thing that he's learned that he does really well is that he does things wrong. You know, and that's what makes him who he is. You know, it's like he's not afraid to try things. Like if he's recording vocals for like Gwen Stefani in the room when she was on some it was on the album Play, and he would record the vocal, but he would also record it in another way, so to give it an extra effect. So even if it was through a little shitty mic, or nowadays he uses like a mobile phone because it gives it different dynamics and whatever, and he will add that as effects in his music, you know. So right. So here's another one. We'll just pop it on again. The same idea. He loves. He samples a blues singer. He actually got rights for this. He was out for dinner with some friends, and they handed him the CD, and he heard the vocals on it. So he found out where the vocals came from, and he went back to the original studio and got the rights for the vocals for this track. Okay, so as I said, Moby is also a big sampler, and this you can hear where he got the idea for this track as well. Studio, right? So yeah, studio practices. He also has, like, out in his studio. He would, like, as I say, he's big into everything technical. He doesn't really like working with, you know, computers or whatever. But he says nowadays, like, he's I suppose his recording tool is Pro Tools, but he still uses everything analog. One of his favorite things is he has a tape machine that kind of. It's broken, I suppose. It just keeps pitching up and whatever. But he says that's why he loves it, because it gives it that character that you can't get from anything else, you know. So because Moby, his little apartments in New York City in the basement, whatever it is, all his gear there, which I'll give you a little list if you want to look at after. But he's got all these real old vintage drum machines. One looks like a dehumidifier. It's like, I mean, it's massive, you know, it's on wheels. But he's a new album out at the moment, and it's the first time that he's actually worked with other people. But he's moved his studio to California, so now I suppose he's in his limelight out there and whatever. But he's still living alone, and, you know, he's still introverted as he was. But with Innocence, he recorded all his drum machines onto, he recorded out patterns because he didn't want to move everything to California. So he could now mix and match his drum samples on his new album, Innocence. So also, as I say, he licensed out a lot of music to movies, and one of as time went by, he got into different movies. We done a theme tune for James Bond, and
Let's look like an idiot together.
The born nuts made him. But you can see as like Moby, as I said, he loves working on his own. Like he's not in like he just when he's doing an album, he may write the song himself or get an idea from something. But if he wants someone to come in, like they will come in on their own, do their job, get out, I'll get back to work, and that's the way he works. He doesn't really collaborate with anyone except for the collaborations, as in for the piece of music he's doing at the time. But as you can see, you know, when you start out with Basin Park, you start out first with Pascal 4-track recorder, and eventually after 15 years, don't be worried if you don't make it this year. Like it does take time. So eventually, as I say, when you do make it and whatever, and you get the chance, eventually you get to do these kind of things. Where now he needs rather than string samples, he gets the orchestra.
Record the orchestra for Extreme Ways, and of all my years of working in classical music, I've never actually recorded with an orchestra before. I'm really excited to hear what happens. I've recorded the drums, the guitars, the bass, the keyboards, everything else in my studio. And now we're recording the orchestra here because it would be kind of difficult to get 110 people into my tiny little studio. James Newton Howard, we like each other and we respect each other when we've talked about re-recording Extreme Ways, and he's been encouraging and supportive, and I wanted to create a juxtaposition with the orchestra and let the orchestra be more melodic and bombastic.
Do good things at home, eventually you get to go out to a place
To
like this.
contrast with the sort of frenetic the best classical musicians on the planet playing music that I've written is really
So
wonderful.
I mean, he wrote everything he wanted, and then after a while, he said, when you get big, you go from one man to 100 people, and you're backing orchestra. So
It's amazing.
So yeah, that's my presentation on Moby. Oops, again.
That'd be cool.
Very good.